When a beloved star passes away, we expect days of mourning, public ceremonies, and crowds of fans. But when Andy Griffith, the man who gave us Mayberry, died in 2012, something shocking happened. Within just 4 hours of his final breath, he was laid to rest in the quiet soil of Roanoke Island. No national farewell, no time for thousands of admirers to gather, not even enough time for some family members to arrive. Why was everything done so quickly? Who made the decision? And what did it reveal about Andy's true character? To answer those questions, we have to go back to the morning of July 3rd, 2012, the day the world lost a television legend. It was early on July 3rd, 2012, when Andy Griffith took his final breath at his coastal home on Roanoke Island, North Carolina. The clock had barely passed 700 when news spread quietly among his closest circle. What happened next stunned even those who thought they knew him well. By 11:30 that same morning, less than 5 hours later, Andy was already laid to rest in the family's private cemetery, just steps from his front porch. There was no elaborate ceremony, no waiting period, and no open casket for the public. It all happened with breathtaking speed, exactly as Andy had planned. Every detail of that morning had been arranged in advance, ensuring that when the time came, there would be no delay and no spectacle. The official cause of Andy Griffith's death was a heart attack, but in truth, it was the end of a long, difficult road. For nearly 2 decades, Andy had quietly battled serious health issues that chipped away at his strength. In 1993, he was struck with Guillain-Barré syndrome, a rare disorder that left him unable to walk for 7 long months, even after recovery. His body never truly regained the vigor that fans remembered from his days as Sheriff Taylor. In 2000, he endured quadruple bypass surgery, a sobering reminder of just how fragile his health had become. And in 2007, another setback, hip surgery that forced him to step back once again. By the summer of 2012, Andy was 86 years old, and his body simply could not keep fighting. The heart attack that morning may have been sudden, but it was not entirely unexpected for those closest to him. The speed of Andy Griffith's burial wasn't an accident, it was his choice. Andy had seen how the passing of other celebrities turned into a frenzy, with helicopters circling overhead, photographers climbing fences, and mourners pressed in from all sides. He wanted none of that. In his final wishes, Andy made it clear he wanted a quiet, private farewell. By arranging for an immediate burial, he ensured the media would have no time to swarm Roanoke Island. Local authorities even helped keep the skies clear, limiting air traffic so the ceremony could remain peaceful. The result was a burial so swift that only a handful of close friends and neighbors were able to attend. Some family members, like his daughter Dixie, didn't arrive in time. It was painful for them. But for Andy, privacy mattered more than public spectacle. His decision reflected the way he had lived, with dignity, simplicity, and an aversion to unnecessary attention. To understand why Andy Griffith chose privacy over spectacle, you only have to look at how he carried himself on set and in life. His colleagues often said that Andy led not with demands, but with example. He was never the loudest voice in the room, but somehow, he always commanded the most respect. Ron Howard, who played young Opie Taylor, remembers that atmosphere vividly. As a child actor, Howard was exposed to a world that could have easily swallowed him up. Yet under Andy's steady presence, the set of The Andy Griffith Show became a safe, nurturing place. He created an environment where we could all do our best work. Howard once recalled, he set the tone by being professional, kind, and completely dedicated to storytelling. That balance of warmth and discipline stayed with Howard throughout his own career as an Oscar-winning director. Other cast members echoed similar feelings. Don Knotts, Andy's partner in comedy and close friend, often described him as a grounding force. While Knotts brought energy and quick wit, Andy supplied calm assurance, making their chemistry legendary. Their partnership showed how Andy believed in sharing the spotlight rather than hogging it. He let others shine, and in doing so, elevated the entire show. Even behind the camera, Andy's influence was felt. Crew members noted how he remembered names, asked about families, and treated everyone as part of the team. That kind of respect was rare in Hollywood, especially during the 1960s, when stars often lived in bubbles of ego and distance. Andy refused to play that role. To him, being authentic was not just a choice, it was the only way he knew how to live. That authenticity carried into his music, his later work in Matlock, and even into his private life. So when the time came to make arrangements for his death, it was consistent that he would choose a farewell rooted in humility. He didn't want crowds, headlines, or the kind of media circus that would have overshadowed his true legacy. Instead, he wanted silence, the sound of waves on Roanoke Island, and the comfort of knowing that those who truly loved him were close by, even within the funeral industry. Andy Griffith's burial stood out as extraordinary. Larry F. Mathis, director of the North Carolina Funeral Directors Association, admitted he had never heard of such a swift burial in more than 3 decades of service. Normally, families take at least a day or two to prepare, allowing relatives to gather, friends to pay respects, and communities to process the loss. Andy's burial, completed in less than 5 hours, was virtually unheard of. But for the Griffith family, tradition mattered less than honoring Andy's wishes. He had made it clear he wanted no delay and no spectacle. For them, the choice wasn't about breaking with custom. It was about loyalty to the man they loved. While some critics called it too fast, the family believed it was the only way to give Andy the dignity and privacy he craved. Cultural norms in the South often emphasize community mourning, with neighbors filling pews and casseroles arriving at the door. Andy, however, had lived his life on different terms. He was deeply spiritual, guided by his Christian faith, and his wife Cindy often spoke about how much that faith shaped his final decisions. To her, the burial wasn't abrupt, it was faithful, aligning with Andy's lifelong belief in simplicity and humility before God. The tension between expectation and reality became part of the larger story. Fans who had grown up with Sheriff Taylor felt a sense of loss at not being able to say goodbye. Yet, in a way, the unusual speed reinforced the very values Andy portrayed on screen: quiet strength, modesty, and a desire to keep life uncluttered by unnecessary drama. In the end, what some called unprecedented was simply Andy Griffith being true to himself, choosing a farewell stripped of fanfare, focused only on peace. Andy Griffith's final resting place is as private as the man himself. His grave lies within the grounds of his Roanoke Island estate, tucked away from the public eye. There are no gates for tourists, no markers for fans to gather around, just a quiet plot of land surrounded by trees and the sound of the nearby water. For those who loved Andy, it was fitting. He gave the world laughter, music, and stories, but he saved his last chapter for himself and his family. The decision to keep the site closed sparked curiosity and even frustration among admirers. Many wished to pay their respects in person, but Andy's family stood firm. This was how he wanted it. Privacy had guided his choices in life, and it continued in death. Even his beloved home, the place where he had lived out his final years, became part of this legacy of secrecy. Not long after his passing, the house was torn down, a move that shocked some neighbors and friends who had hoped it would be preserved as a memorial. Rumors swirled that Andy had once considered turning the property into a museum, but those plans never materialized. Instead, fans found a different place to connect with his memory. In Mount Airy, North Carolina, Andy's real-life hometown, and the inspiration for Mayberry, the Andy Griffith Museum keeps his legacy alive. Costumes, scripts, photos, and personal treasures are on display, offering the kind of public remembrance that his private gravesite could not. In the end, his burial site and the fate of his house underscored the two sides of Andy Griffith, the man who belonged to America, and the man who wanted, above all, a quiet corner of the world to call his own. When Andy Griffith passed, he left behind not only a towering legacy in television and music, but also a considerable fortune. His estate was estimated at around $60 million, built over decades through his work on The Andy Griffith Show, his hit courtroom drama Matlock, and his production company. Add to that his film roles, recordings, and a late career Grammy Award for his 1997 gospel album. And it was clear Andy had achieved financial success as enduring as his fame. Inevitably, questions arose who would inherit it all. His wife, Cindy, was the closest by his side and had been his partner in his final years. His daughter, Dixie, from his earlier marriage, was also believed to be a beneficiary. Yet whispers circulated that Dixie may have been cut out of the will, a rumor never publicly confirmed. What is certain is that Andy, ever private, kept those details within the family, away from public scrutiny. Friends and biographers point out that his approach to money reflected the same values as his burial. He never flaunted wealth or chased luxury. He invested in projects that mattered to him, supported causes quietly, and lived comfortably, but not extravagantly. The estate he left behind was a testament to steady work, careful choices, and a career that spanned nearly half a century. In many ways, the handling of his fortune echoed the spirit of his life, controlled, private, and protected from gossip as much as possible. Andy Griffith had spent his career in the spotlight, but when it came to his family and his legacy, he drew a firm line between public curiosity and personal truth. Andy Griffith's burial may have shocked fans with its speed and secrecy, but in the end, it told us something profound about who he really was. For all the fame, the awards, and the decades of television history, Andy never wanted to be treated like a spectacle. He wanted to be remembered not with cameras and crowds, but with the laughter he inspired and the quiet dignity he carried through life. The decision to be laid to rest within hours of his passing was not about shutting people out. It was about protecting the peace he valued most. It reflected the same humility we saw in Sheriff Taylor, the same warmth that made Mayberry feel like home, and the same authenticity that defined Andy Griffith as a man. Even now, more than a decade later, his influence lingers in every rerun, every memory of Mayberry, and every story told about a time when television was simple, yet unforgettable. So now, we'd like to hear from you. What do you remember most about Andy Griffith? Was it his gentle humor, his music, or perhaps the way he brought family and community into our living rooms? Share your thoughts below, we'd love to read them. And if you enjoyed this look back, be sure to subscribe to our channel. Together, we'll keep alive the stories, the culture, and the unforgettable spirit of the 1960s.